Welcome to Plus Talk on Plus Life, where we're all about turning positive into a plus. Today I'm joined by a very brave young man by the name of Davey Tucker. Davey reached out to me last year when he discovered Plus Life and shared his story with me, and it's a pretty powerful one. Today we're getting raw, we're getting honest. Davey, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Well, thank you, because I know what we're about to talk about takes incredible bravery, and it's something that you've struggled with. So I really appreciate you coming on, because I think there are a lot of people who are going to be watching this who can very much relate to you and your story. So Why don't we start back with how you found me and why you reached out to me?
I found you through Facebook. When I had just got my diagnosis and found out that I was HIV positive back in September, I very much kept it to myself, but then I went onto Facebook and I just wanted to type in the word HIV into my search bar and just to see if there were any of my friends that were talking about it, if there was any sort of, chatter amongst people that I knew in my orbit. And then we have mutual friends, obviously, and then your name popped up and I saw that you were an advocate for this. And I got to learn about Plus Life and and so I reached out to you on the messenger just to kind of, I think you were the first person I probably talked to in terms of disclosing my status.
What was that like? What was that like for you, having to share that moment? I mean, just also sharing it with a complete stranger. But tell me about the moments before you typed in sort of the reality of your world.
I had a lot of anxiety. I mean, it was the monster under my bed, most like every other gay man. We grow up with that fear, and then it became a reality. And I wasn't so much scared to reach out to you. It was more so probably my closer inner circle of friends and family that I was most nervous about telling. I knew that, you would, I was introduced into this sort of community that I now knew would embrace me as soon as I chose to talk about it. And I knew that when you show some sort of vulnerability to someone, people notice that. And I think that gives you this space to feel safe about talking about it. So.
And since then, have you been able to have a conversation with your family and those close to you?
I have, yeah. Most of my inner circle knows, so it's been pretty relieving to be able to talk about this and to still get the same support that I would have gotten from my friends and family who know me as Davey.
Right. And there's something else your friends and family know about you, and anyone who watches you on Facebook. We know that you're an incredibly accomplished musician. But there's more to it, isn't there?
So I've been struggling with substance abuse. So to be able to navigate this sort of musical career where you're playing the lottery with music, I was trying to balance that with a different world completely, which they don't go together, I don't think so. For me, at least, it was something that I've struggled to balance, which was substance use,
But interestingly, I think a lot of gay men, young gay men especially, when we've seen this time and time again, who have an HIV diagnosis, substance abuse is something that kind of, unfortunately, seems to go slightly hand in hand. Wouldn't you agree?
And that's probably why I have my diagnosis, is because it was a lot easier for that to happen in my life when I dropped the ball, and things slipped through the cracks. I remember I didn't go for my 3-month checkup for PrEP that I was on because the health coordinator, I knew her husband through a work event, and it was just awkward to come to her about my sex life, and so that was enough for me to not show up for a checkup, and I didn't get that prescription refilled of PrEP. And, when you kind of let your hair down in an unsafe way using substances, it was just the perfect storm that came together for that to happen. So I accepted it, and I kind of, prepared myself for this to happen long before it happened, just because I felt like that's where I was headed. And sadly, was okay with that in a sense. I accepted it, I accepted these things that weren't my reality yet, but then became true.
That's an interesting way of putting it, actually. So you think because of the substance use and abuse, that that you have participated in, you sort of went, well, I know I'm kind of spinning the wheel of Russian roulette. I'm spinning the barrel of the gun. It's probably going to happen, so who cares?
Right. Yeah. So right. Yeah. And so when it happened, it didn't shatter my mental hygiene. It didn't go in the toilet like I thought it would have. It kind of just was, oh well, this was just another thing to check off the list of what's inevitably going to happen, which is really sad to say. And that I reveled in something so different than my day-to-day life, that it was just, I kind of glorified it, and this false sense of I'm not sure, of reality.
So when you get an HIV diagnosis and you go through all the things you go through as somebody who has an addiction, there would be some that would say, well, isn't that enough of a wake-up call to make yourself sit up and go, okay, shit, this has happened? So
yeah,
it's easy to say it, right? But it's not so easy to do it.
No, because how do you go back to the dating world and feel like you're able to contribute and someone sees that that's worthwhile for them, because it's so easy to just disconnect and do something that's meaningless, that you don't have to really, it doesn't have that sort of I don't know, there's just this you disconnect and you don't have to worry about things like going on a first date and disclosing. I put on a different hat. I'm able to put on this hat that feels a little bit looser, and I'm not committed to any sort of relationship. And so I haven't yet learned what it's like to be in a sense to where I would have to feel like that's something that has to be said, and then wondering if those people ditch me on the first date or not. I haven't gotten there yet because I haven't put on my dating hat.
Well, it's interesting you say that, though. So it's based on stigma and fear of rejection.
Right. Yeah.
And if I'm hearing you correctly, when you decide to go off and use, and it's kind of like a way of going, I don't have to deal with the reality of it, because no doubt the people that I'm interacting with are either in the same boat or it's kind of assumed that maybe they are, so we don't have that conversation. Right. So thus the rejection doesn't happen?
Yeah, I surrounded myself with people who it was very similar situations for all of us, and that's why we were all still in that situation. I mean, because we didn't have to answer those questions that might seem like they could be tough to say out loud, but and the fact that I haven't given it a chance yet to even see, so I keep practicing unsafe behavior, with people who found themselves in similar situations.
Have you ever had that conversation with them? I know it's a bit of a, buzzkill, I guess, if you're all in a heightened state. But have you ever had that conversation with any of those people that you're with about the fact that even though we probably shouldn't be using, it's not good for our mental health, our physical health, and everything else?
Oh,
I don't have to care.
Yeah, I'm the first one to say these things, and I either get kicked out of a party, or it's just like, we don't say those things like that. You're bringing it down. You can clearly sense that people feel like you're attacking their ego when it's not about them at all. It's just about, if we're going to do this thing, like, let's have an honest conversation that can be very mature, and it's not judging it. You're acknowledging something, and then you're moving forward. And I always got backlash for that, and I found myself trying to redeem myself with people who don't care about me, and it just was a lot of wasted time.
What do you think the crux is? Is it the fear of rejection because of the stigma?
I think it starts with that, but then it just becomes this unhealthy, familiar situation we find ourselves in, and we quickly adapt to this sort of communication that's as if we're in middle school again. We don't say things out loud. We'll have this elephant in the room that turns into 4 hours later, the guy's chasing you out of his house with a silverware. It's just like, you had no idea this person had an issue with you until it came out in some other form of violence or something. When it came from, it didn't have to be that way. And that's me being silly. But yeah, I just think that people kind of lose the ability to communicate, and then there becomes all these internal wars that mean nothing. And it's just this, it's really silly, and I'm just trying to acknowledge something, and I think the way that I want to talk about it or bring something up that's important comes off as if you're judging that person, or it becomes about you're attacking their character, when really you're just trying to talk about things that we exile. Those things, those are things we push down. Even addiction or no addiction, we all have things in our lives that we exile, that we don't want to talk about. It's just that when you struggle with addiction, you're forced to bring those to the surface, and you have to say them out loud. So you now have to be okay being that person that is going to be the one that gets someone's gears turning, because you're saying something that's truthful. When sadly, that's how we communicate here, especially in the United States. Hey, how are you doing? Great, good to hear you. It's like you don't really tell people. But I think for me, it's forced me to have to say some of these things out loud that gets people. It either rubs in the wrong way, but deep down, I think they know that's just us trying to connect, and we just don't do that enough. So that if you look at someone in the eyes, it's uncomfortable. It's not appropriate. And we've kind of lost touch with that. And I think it's just forced me to have to bring these things to the surface, which I've learned in some therapy sessions.
Well, and I also think we live in an era now where everyone is very hypersensitive to anything and everything. And, I get in trouble quite often because sometimes I have an opinion. And just because your opinion doesn't necessarily match somebody else's, it doesn't mean you're judging them. It doesn't mean you're casting aspersions on them and thinking that they're lesser than you. You just have different opinions. But I feel like in this climate and this culture that we live in, as you said, particularly here in the United States, you're almost not allowed to have an opinion anymore unless it's the popular.
Yeah, I mean, you really feel like you're walking on ice sometimes when it's not worth it when it involves your health, and you're not sure if you leave that place that you're in, if you're going to be okay. So you're kind of sometimes I'm a cry for help, and I don't realize it through my words or my body language, and I don't see it until after the fact, or it makes a lot of sense after the fact, that, oh, I just wanted help, or I needed someone to help me sort this situation out because I wasn't sure how to. But you realize no one's there to help you in that sense. So you're left, at the crosswalk to some random lady, like being, sharing something that's probably meant for your mother or something, because how do you do it? You're in LA and you're away from home, and home is a far ways away, and you've did a crazy thing. And how do you do that by yourself? Who do you ask for help? And I'm surprised by how many people are threatened by you asking for help in certain ways, which makes sense in some ways. In others, it's just like, well, I've really got to get this together because I feel like I'm on my own.
Yeah. How much of your getting that HIV diagnosis that you talked about saying, well, you kind of figured it was going to happen, so let it happen. How much of that and living with that do you think plays into the fact that you find yourself still falling back and using?
Yeah, it plays a part because I'm not ready to, like I said, I'm someone who likes to have a monogamous relationship. I accept all types of relationships. I've just always found myself being monogamous. And I don't, part of me, my relapses or using is a way to feel like I'm not ready to go back to that yet. And I don't have to face that's what I want for myself. And so the more I waste my time elsewhere, I can put that off, and it will put off the tough conversations to be had.
So what do you hope comes of this conversation that we're having and that people all around the world are going to see?
I hope it just, helps other people who are in similar situations know that these are conversations that you can have. You can talk about it. It doesn't have to be something that you exile. And there are a lot of people going through this quietly. And, I think that we can't afford to do that because you'll lose yourself and you're not sure how you got there because you forgot that we could talk about it. And it's me saying these things out loud is me trying to rip myself out of my current self from 10,000 feet above and say, hey, you're doing all these things right now, but also there's this, where's your head right now? Just trying to check in with myself, which involves, to me, a group conversation,
Where is your head right now?
In Texas. My head right now, I don't know. I'm not sure. In terms of, what do you mean?
Well,
Sorry.
where is your sort of mental state these days? You're driving cross country, you're heading
Yeah,
back home. You
yeah,
and you can tell me to mind my own business, but I mean,
yeah.
within the
No,
last
yeah.
week,
My head.
relapse,
Yeah. Okay.
relapse.
All right. Yeah. So I'm driving from LA to Alabama during this global pandemic to try to be with my family during these times because it's really hard to navigate a substance use problem alone in a city where everyone's social distancing and you need your friends the most. That's when I need my friends, and I can't. They're not there for me because they're taking care of themselves. So I'm booking at home and I'm trying to get home responsibly, but I don't trust myself most days. I know that my dopamine receptors are waiting for that hit. So I will justify why I found myself in a relapse, unconsciously maybe, but still taking responsibility. And it's a weird to balance that with that kind of thinking. So, I'm halfway to home. I'm in Texas, and we'll see if we can just make it home without upsetting myself or my family in terms of a relapse. Because for me, a relapse would be just like a waste of time. I don't wear it well. So, and if I know that about myself, that's all I need to know is to cut back and to try to um, get back to my old self.
So when the Davey of today steps out of his body and looks at the person sitting talking to me right now, sitting in his car, driving across country, what do you see?
I think this is something that I think it's a good thing. It's good momentum towards something healthy. Like I don't think I'm out of the woods, but I think that it's a weird mix of, oh, I'm making this all about myself because I have to talk about my issues when I don't want it to be about me. But at the same time, I'm talking about a lot of things that, again, we all exile these things that we kind of, I don't get to hear these conversations a lot unless I'm in a CMA meeting or AA meeting, like why can't these conversations be had, a little more candidly with your loved ones and your friends, or just someone who just might ask, like if we can just rethink the stigma behind it, like we just label people as junkies and then they get lost and we don't care how they got to where they are, and we failed them.
So where do you hope you are in 12 months time, Davey? I know you are an incredible accomplished musician, and I encourage everyone to check out your Facebook profile and listen to you play because it's quite phenomenal. And I think there's a lot of people that go, wow, he has all this talent. There's people I think out there that go, wow, he has all this talent and he's throwing it away. And to that I say poo-poo to those people, because addiction is a very real thing. And also an HIV diagnosis and the struggle of what that means, because what society has told us for 40 years an HIV diagnosis means tends to, encourage the addiction side of things, I guess.
Yeah. And I don't think that any of these things that have happened in my life validate. I mean, I have more to say now as an artist. I'm capable of writing music. I'm a composer. I don't need to live the life of a tortured artist that so many of us subscribe to because we think that's the life we're supposed to live. I think that's BS. But, things have happened in my life that, it's given me more to say, and it's given me more encouragement to keep going and to write. And when you write music, if you just think about the blank page and you have nothing to reel it in to write about it, you could get so lost. Now I have parameters that have really locked in like what my angle is here and what I have to get out, because my job as a composer is to reflect the times, and part of that involves me as well. So
Well, Davey, I really appreciate your candor, your honesty, and your bravery to talk to me today as you take this trek across the country to get home, and a bit of a sort of personal odyssey as well for you, hopefully to get to some clarity where you can get your addiction and substance abuse under control. Will you do me a favor? Will you keep in touch with us? Will you check in with us from time to time and let us know how it's going, good or bad? Because I think you're reaching a lot of people today who are too afraid to talk about anything like you've spoken about.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And thanks again for having me.
Absolutely. Davey Tucker, you are the best. That's going to do it for this episode of Plus Talk on Plus Life. Thanks for watching. If you want more information on what we've discussed today, you can do so by following us at Plus Life Media across all social media platforms or pluslifemedia.com. I'll see you next time.